Broadcast for shooters, hunters, and gun enthusiasts. This is the Firearms Radio Network. The bandwidth for this episode of the AR-15 podcast is sponsored by Patriot Patch Company. PatriotPatch.co.
Welcome to the AR-15 podcast. This is the podcast about your favorite black rifle. This show is for you. Whether you're building your first AR or you've been building ARs for years, there is something we can all do to take our black rifle to the next level.
You make this show possible by clicking through our Brownells and Amazon affiliate links. The next time you order online, go to AR15podcast.com and click through our Brownells and Amazon affiliate links. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and a small portion of your sale goes to supporting pro-gun radio like the AR-15 podcast.
Well, hello, folks, for another episode of the podcast. Tonight we're up to number 169, and this, of course, is the AR-15 podcast. So in this episode, we're going to have the opportunity to speak with Ron from the Wisconsin Trigger Company, who really is bringing back to life a phenomenal trigger that I think is worth spreading the word about. But before we dig into the show, I want to remind you all that the NRA show listener meetup is going to take place at the Cardinal Hall of Fame Cafe on Saturday, May 21st at 7 p.m. And so Jake, our illustrious leader, tells us if any of you can say ambidextrous, just like he does, he will buy you a round of drinks. So I would suggest you guys practice up and try to get out there and catch him for that. And do hold his feet to the fire because we expect you all to get free drinks. And of course, we have our Frontier Armory 9mm carbine giveaway. I know that JD put some snapshots up on the Facebook page of what is looking like a pretty phenomenal Cerakote job, and it looks like it is a Cryptek with well, I'm bad at colors, which is why my wife doesn't let me do anything in the house, but it's very nice. So get up onto the Facebook and take a look at that. And we do want to give a shout out to JD and tell him to take it easy and get better, since he is apparently kneeling before the porcelain gods and giving up sacrifices. So we really feel for him, but we're glad we are not him right now. Now that all of that housekeeping is out of the way, Ron, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Okay, my name's Ron Albanese, owner and managing director of the Wisconsin Trigger Company.
And so, Ron, you reached out to me with something that, after doing a little bit of due diligence, kind of seems to have the legendary feel of all of a sudden getting a hold of a unicorn. So what we're going to be talking tonight about is the Milazzo Krieger Mark or MK2 trigger system. And this trigger system has a rather long and storied history with the competitive shooters who have basically set the gold standard for what it is to put into an AR. Is that about right, Ron?
Yeah. It's allegedly it is the winningest trigger in national match competition for AR-15s. The Army service rifle trigger of choice for many, many years, used by pretty much all the top shooters for quite a few years, and coming back now.
Tell me, we talked about a story about the owner, Charlie Milazzo, who created the trigger. Tell me about kind of his journey to go from concept to a product that people were excited about.
Well, Charlie's a big M1A fan and wasn't a real fan of the AR-15, and basically because the trigger was just so bad. That single stage GI trigger, they're rough, they have a lot of pull to them, not a very good system. but it works for an AR-15. Works good enough. But for actual match shooting, just not going to cut it. So he got the idea to take and make a 2-stage trigger fit into an AR-15. And he had a big old easel set out, had a big sheet of scratch paper and drafting paper on it, and he would just be asleep, get an idea, run downstairs and start drawing for a couple hours, and then sit around and stare at it and try and figure out the math and all the geometry that goes into this, and came up with a pretty incredible design. And it took him better than a year just to get it actually on paper and then start to build something. His first one was a GI trigger that he welded up and gave himself a little extra metal to start machining it down and make a 2-stage or 2nd-stage disconnector fit in it. That trigger, within a day or two of actually being done, put in a gun and tested slightly, was at Camp Perry, and people were shooting it and just couldn't believe how it felt. It was such an improvement over that original GI style single stage trigger. It was absolutely amazing. It wasn't even heat treated. There was nothing special done to it. He basically just filed down the welds a little bit and smoothed everything out, and away it went. And when it came back from there, that's when he really sat down and started figuring out, okay, how do we actually produce it? It's one thing to make a one-off trigger. It's another thing to actually start producing them. And he spent some more time and figured out all the different steps and procedures to manufacturing it, along with, we have about 30 or better fixtures just for measuring things and checking things, and little dial indicators going everywhere, because absolutely every single surface is so critical to functioning properly when you're dealing with a national match trigger. And Charlie just kept going from there, and he was working out of his basement and struggling to find good machine shops that could actually produce what he had done, one off of. And it's pretty good battle to get that thing to market way back in the day. And CNC was out there, but it wasn't what it was today, or is today. It was rather limited. So production was slow, and castings, they would get castings, and it would take 16 plus weeks, and then they'd go to a machine shop that bragged about how good they were and the fact that they can copy this, they can build it right to print, and he'd get a batch back and they're all wrong. They'd give them 3 or 4 samples that would work just fine. You get 500 of them back and they don't fit. They don't feel good. They have rough surfaces, things like that. So it was it was an uphill battle the entire way to get this thing produced. So, but that's basically how it came to market.
When he brought it to market, how long did it stay in the market? Because we're talking early 90s, late 80s when he came to market.
Very late 80s is when he had the idea and started building them by one-offs and started to get production going. Early 90s into the mid 90s is when it was in production. So roughly 4 years, 4 to 5 years, and roughly 3,000 to 4,000 units actually produced and sold. And that was
AMU take them up.
Yeah, AMU they were the big users of them. That was the only trigger they used for quite a few years. They have the first ones off the board, first ones off the shelf, and they kept them in competition for quite a few years, which goes to the durability of this thing. It's amazing. The Army took them out of competition, not because they've never had one fail. Okay, these things ran and ran and ran. I talked to the team coordinator, and he said, "Yeah, they finally took them out." This was when Charlie told us he wasn't building them anymore, we thought our world ended, because nobody could beat these guys. I mean, you got the the Formula One drivers of shooters in the Army Marksmanship Unit, and they're running these absolute hyper-tuned triggers that there was nothing to compare to it, and all of a sudden, sorry, you can't have them anymore. Well, they kept them in competition for like 5-6 years after they went out of production, and they never had one break. The team manager started taking them off out of the competition guns because he said they're getting old. Something's got to go wrong, eventually.
Right.
And still, we're now sponsoring the Navy, the junior rifle team for the Navy, and the reason we're doing that is I got a call from him, and he said their team coach, Lieutenant Commander Zerby, he said, hey, the Army gave me a bunch of MK2 triggers, and they're pretty old. He goes, I'd feel better if you looked them over and made sure they were okay. So, all right, well, we'll take a look at them. So they sent them all back, and you got to remember, these triggers have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of rounds through them.
Right.
According to the Army, they wore out receivers, they wore out barrels, they just kept swapping the triggers back into these new guns. We got it back, and we got the 4 triggers that the Army had given the Navy, and I couldn't find a thing wrong with them. There's literally nothing wrong with them. They are as smoother than the day they left the shop, and about the only thing is the finish is worn off in a bunch of places.
Wow.
But we ended up giving the Navy all brand new triggers, mostly because in the old days, the A1s, you actually had to grind the tails down to get your over travel. And the Army guys, being who they are and as good as they are, they had these things set just so far to the edge that, quite honestly, in the hands of a less experienced shooter, they're not safe.
Right.
You get an Army marksman who's puts 200,000 rounds a year down range, you can hand him anything and it's pretty much safe. But you give it to a junior sailor, probably not so much. So we gave them all brand new triggers. Nice part was I got all the old triggers. Yeah, and there's one. I don't know if you can see this. This is one of them.
Oh yeah.
And that's how crisp it still is. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them, other than they just not enough safety hook overlap on them for your average guy.
Well, let me ask you this, Ron. So Charlie made production runs for a couple of years,
right?
And then he kind of hung it up.
Yep. He was producing them, and a few years into production, 2 years or so into production, he entered into some negotiations with some very large manufacturers to make it their target trigger and basically paying them royalties on it and all that sort of thing. And they just decided, we're just going to go ahead and build them ourselves. We don't really need to worry about the fact that you hold the patent on all of this stuff. So they started copying it, and a few other people started copying things and infringing on some of his patents, and he just got fed up. And in one day, he said he was sitting in his basement, got a letter from his attorney saying, hey, we found company A is now manufacturing basically a trigger that you can swap in your hammer, your trigger. It won't feel real good, but it'll work. We need another $10,000 to keep going with the cease and desist lawsuits. And Charlie said, that's enough. I had enough. And he swept the benches clear. He put it all into boxes and stuffed it in a safe.
Wow.
And that's where it's at for better than 15 years. And, he wouldn't even talk to me about it. And I've been friends with him for quite a few years through some other businesses that I had owned. And an old shooting, you go out shooting a bunch at basically our co-attorney. We use the same gun attorney basically, and he holds a big shootout at his place. Charlie wouldn't even talk to you about it. Say, Charlie, I really want one of your triggers. I've heard a lot about them. I've never used one. And no, he wouldn't even talk to me about it. Wouldn't even show me one. And I did not fire. I dry fired one time in an old SP1 rifle that he had sitting around, and it was pretty darn incredible. And I didn't get to actually live fire the thing until I bought the company. So, and I was pretty impressed with it once I finally did. So, yeah, and Charlie, he just had enough. That was it. So that's why he hung it all up, and I just got lucky. Enough nagging, years and years of nagging, finally paid off, and he was able to buy the place. So
Charlie was a gunsmith, right?
Correct.
And Charlie's still with us, isn't he?
Oh yeah. He's kind of semi-retired. He's I think he's probably in his late 60s now, mid to late 60s.
Yeah.
He builds just an absolute premium 700 Remington police model. Chops the barrel down to a very specific length that he's in Charlie's way of calculating things, and he won't stop until it's perfect. He calculated out the absolute perfect length for this rifle and came up with his own crown that he puts on the barrel. And again, because he's such a big trigger guy, he reworks their triggers. 700s obviously have a bad reputation for trigger issues on some of the models. He goes through them, and they are incredible when he's done with them. So yeah, he's still around. He's still building some of the best sniper rifles you can buy. A lot of police departments, pretty much all the big police departments in Wisconsin use them. I know a lot of places all over the country are using his rifles yet. So yeah, he's still there.
Well, so Charlie had a very specific requirement for his rifles, being that they would never leave his shop with a shiny stainless steel finish. And
Yep.
Isn't that how he came to get to know you?
Yeah, I had known him a little bit before then, through our common attorney and through going to some shoots. And I had a business in Waukesha, a little bit to the east of where we're at now in Wisconsin. And one of the things we did in there, we did a lot of parkerizing, we did a lot of powder coating, and we built machine gun mounts and helicopter door gun mounts, that sort of thing. And our big blast cabinet, Charlie just fell in love with the finish that leaves on a bare stainless barrel. Because guys they call up and they want their gun done, they want a stainless barrel put on it, but they don't want it black oxided. They want it shiny, or they want it silver. Well, he would not let a shiny barrel out of his shop. So he'd bring it over by us. He would sandblast it down, so it'd be a nice matted out finish. And just the aluminum oxide grit that we used and the pressures that we had in that cabinet gave him the finish that he thought was perfect for a non-shiny barrel. But so that's how I got to work with him a little bit more after doing some of that stuff. And yeah, he's very, very particular with everything he does. I've watched him put together a 1911, which is, he's old school. That's another one of his favorite guns. And he'd blast the whole thing down. We'd throw it in our park tanks. He'd get it out. It'd look pretty darn good to me. And he would find a mark on a small internal lever or something and start all over again until absolutely every single part was perfect. So he's very good and very, very particular. It pays off.
Well, so you acquired the company and you went back into production. So
Yep.
Why don't you tell me the story of what does that look like? You've basically unwrapped a unicorn and nobody can find them. They're, the rarest thing out there, and everybody who's ever used one has glorious things to say about it. And here you are, you now own the company. So walk me through what this kind of transition was like.
Well, when when we actually took possession of all the parts and fixturings and drawings and everything else, they were all just in boxes, just simply big boxes of parts, big boxes of every kind of piece you could imagine, and in all various states of machining, because he didn't just sit one day and all I'm going to do is grind the hammer faces. He would work on something and work on a few other things, work on some of this. So everything was in just a mix mash of parts. And when he put it away, he had no intention of it ever seeing the light of day again. So he didn't even, other than he made sure everything was packed properly and nothing was broken, he really didn't care what order it went in. Fortunately, Charlie still has a very good memory for the most part, and we have 30 plus fixtures that measure absolutely every single angle, every hook face, every dimension from point to point that you could imagine. And Charlie sat down, and my eyes, I'm too old to really see it, so we had William, our son, he's the production manager out here. A lot younger, a lot better eyes. He's the one famous for all our videos on how to put these things in your guns if you watched any of the installation videos. Charlie sat down with him and took one fixture at a time and showed him how to do it. And it took quite a few weeks of just training on how to use these things and what to look for and what to do. So once we basically had everything in the shop, and we started going through the fixtures and just checking it off the list. Okay, well, here's the disconnector. You need, before you do anything, you got to make sure that the hole for the disconnector mounting pin is in the proper place. Okay, well, you make sure you put it on a fixture. It tells you if that's in the proper place. Well, then, while you're putting on the fixture, you got to run it through go and no-go gauges to make sure that it hasn't been cut down too far anywhere else. You got to make sure that, well, we always run into a little bit of problem where you have to take a diamond stone and just shave the back end about put a little 45-degree radius across the back here. And so you just take a stone and you'd hit it with there. Little things like that, and all the little parts that are associated with this, until finally William pretty much had everything down that, okay, this is how you do it. We pretty much knew that he was up to speed on it when we sent Charlie. Charlie decided to put one in for a friend, and we sent him down one of the triggers that we had done, and he was thrilled. He says, "Oh, yep, you guys are doing it just like I did it. It's perfect. I didn't have to do anything." But you need to loosen up the pins a little bit. Well, Charlie's ideas of tolerances are pretty good, and I'm arguing with him. And I should have known better than to argue with him, because he knows this stuff pretty well. And he's telling me, "Oh, these pins they're the wrong size. These are just going to be they're not going to be right. Measure one." So I get out my mic and I'm measuring one of our pins. I says, "Charlie, it's 15713." And he goes, No, that's wrong. That's the wrong one. You're off by almost 10 thousandths of an inch, or 1/10,000th of an inch. Charlie, nobody in the world is going to know that is off by 1/10,000th of an inch. That's ridiculous. Well, yeah, you won't know it's wrong, but it's wrong. So we made new pins. So that's the kind of pickiness that it took, and the struggle with the subcontractors that do the big machine work. You can't do it in one shop. There's no way. It wouldn't be feasible. When you take a hammer, well, the machines that grind them flat and true them up to make sure that they're perfectly flat and they're going to be running straight. I could give them a tolerance in microns, and they'll meet that tolerance. That's how good this stuff is. And obviously we don't need to give them tolerances in that, but you can't just buy that machine to straighten out and grind hammers flat. you're going to spend a couple $100,000, and what do you do with a machine that sits still for 11 months out of the year?
Right.
The same thing with our with machining the triggers themselves. The trigger housings, they're done on very, very, very close tolerance CNC machines, CNC turning centers, and the mills and stuff. And it would take you years to learn how to operate the machine to the standards that they need to be operated to do what it takes to make that trigger housing. Not to mention, you're going to spend $500,000 on a machine that's, again, going to sit idle for 11 months out of a year when it comes right down to it. So we contract out with the absolute best people. A lot of them are the same people that were doing Charlie's. Our triggers, they're done at a shop, and they'll have a pallet of our triggers in there. When they're done machining our stuff, they get taken off and machines get cleaned up. And the next thing they're running are parts for Rafale missiles. It's all aerospace industry stuff, super high quality, very high tolerance, machining. And another interesting thing, Wisconsin Trigger Company, there's only one thing that is not made in Wisconsin, and that's our box. At the time, I couldn't find a litho laminating printer that did a nice enough job, so I ended up going to California for the box. But the castings are done in Wisconsin. Every single machining step is done in Wisconsin. The finishes are done in Wisconsin. So it's definitely the Wisconsin Trigger Company.
Well, I can attest that it doesn't have to say Wisconsin Trigger and Box Company for that to be right. So, was it a big struggle to take Charlie's 1990s era production trigger and translate it into 2015, 2016? Or did it just become easier because 25 years of
technology,
refinement of the tell me about that.
Well, it took, I wouldn't say it was difficult. The difficult part came in making sure that just because you can make it faster doesn't make it better. We could not, part of the buyout deal with Charlie was we will not lower the quality one bit. It will be made to the exact same tolerances that Charlie was making them to. So I have to stick to that. That's how I told him we would build it. So, the hard part came in with, okay, here is a trigger housing. We need to machine all these different surfaces. They all have to be keyed into each other. In the old days, Charlie would take him to a place that would machine part of it, and then they'd flip it over, they'd machine another part, they'd move it again, they'd machine another part, then they would set it off to the side. Next guy would come through, he'd lock it down another machine, and he'd cut the last of it. He'd square up the top of the tower or something. Well, the hard part was now with the modern machines, and it wasn't hard, it's just part of modern machining. It was how to get the production down to where, okay, we're taking that trigger housing and now it's only being moved one time. You only have to reshape it, reposition it once. Well, what that allows you to do is you can hold your tolerance from where the center hole, the trunnion hole for the receiver pin to go through has very, very strict relationships to where the nose of the trigger, if you look at one of our directions, it's point G on our trigger, right, the nose of the trigger. And then there's a triangulates off of the trigger hook, but the back side or the bottom side of the trigger hook. And then there's another point where the hole that mounts the disconnector, that has to be perfectly positioned so that when the hammer comes down, it catches the hammer completely properly. So it was a matter of getting fixtures made up and getting the procedures down to where all that was done in one shot. So where he was flipping things probably 4 to 5 times, refixturing, we're doing it in 2. So it just leads to our tolerances being tighter and our repeatability being tighter. And speed goes up because all our fixturing is made to do this. Where in the old days, they would have to refixture, reposition everything, remeasure, okay, drill your hole or grind your face. With ours, it's pinged in the one time, it's perfect. Okay, drill 3 holes, cut 2 faces, and trim this off at the end. So it makes it quicker, but it keeps the same tolerances because of the modern machining processes.
Now, in terms of assembling your triggers, you still have a hand fitting component, don't you? So you've not eliminated the hands-on assembly and refinement that has always kind of been there.
Right. Yeah, you could get away without doing a lot of the little things that we do, but that's what makes ours better. Our trunnion hole that the receiver pin goes through, that is all done by hand. They're drilled, but they're finished off by hand. There's a guy sitting at a machine, and he takes that trigger and he will slide it onto a honing machine. It'll get hand lapped. The outside edges get all hand stoned. Then it gets polished up and finished. It goes to the finishing shop to get turned black and shiny and pretty looking. So there's more than just that little spot that's done by hand, but that's what makes it better. You can take that trigger hole, that receiver pin hole, and I know there's the big names out there. They EDM that hole, which that's okay. You make 4 passes with an EDM, a couple of coring passes, and then you skim cut it. It would be okay, and it'll be good enough for a better than stock trigger, but it'll never compete with a trigger that's been hand lapped like that. No. Our RA values, the actual surface tensions are way below. The surface friction is way below what you'll find on other triggers. You can't get it by simple EDMing. You have to polish by hand. So we're not gonna be pushing out 2,000 triggers every month. You can't do it. You can't build it by hand and do that. We're happy. We're not a huge company. It's pretty much family owned. We're more than happy to just make the best one in the world and make as many as we can without skimping on the quality. And that's where we leave it. I don't want to go and hire 50 people to sit and polish trigger holes all day long. Right. They'll probably last about 2 days. They'll be so bored with it, they'll leave anyhow. So it's just not worth doing. Let's just do it right and not try to do it in mass quantities.
So in terms of the trigger, can you describe what is unique about the trigger that sets it apart, aside from the manufacturing quality aspects? What is it in the design of the trigger that sets it apart from kind of the rank and file of what we see out there in the market today?
Okay, well, the obvious thing would be the difference between a single stage, which is your standard GI type trigger, okay, and a 2-stage trigger. A single stage trigger, basically you don't know when that hammer is going to actually release. You pull through, and when you finally get to the end of your hooks, the hammer releases. With a 2-stage trigger, and this is pretty much true of all the 2-stage triggers, you'll pull that trigger back and you'll feel the wall. Any more movement and that hammer will drop. Okay, well, what makes ours stand up above the other 2-stage triggers is now if you're going to be able to see any of this, we use adjustable disconnector. You turn this little screw and it will move our disconnector back and forth. Okay, what that does is that allows you to place that wall that you come up against when you pull the trigger. It allows you to place the trigger and hammer hook at the very, very edge. Okay, by doing that, you'll have absolutely, okay, there's your first stage. The tiniest bit of movement and that thing releases. Okay, if you don't have that, you'll have this. I can pull a trigger. When's it going to go? You won't know until finally it releases. Okay, if you don't have it adjustable, okay, that was a single stage trigger. That second one, the other one was our two stage. Okay, if you don't have that adjustable and you buy a two stage trigger, non-adjustable two stage trigger, when you assemble it, the disconnector assembles just like a single stage. It's riding on the same pin that the trigger is riding on. Ours has the disconnector riding on its own pin. Okay, it has its own separate geometry to the movement of the disconnector. Makes it feel a little different. They can't make a non-adjustable trigger two-stage to where you can set the hooks that close to the edge because it's not safe. If you put it right at the very edge and you put it into a lower quality receiver, or quite honestly even a higher quality receiver that is not built to mil spec perfectly dead on, the hooks might miss.
Right.
Or you're way overhooked. Okay, and now that's what leads to your creep. Okay, with ours, you can put it in the lowest quality receiver you can find. You can put in the absolute best quality receiver you can find. It doesn't matter. You simply adjust your disconnector till those hooks are right at the edge. And now the tiniest bit of movement, it releases. So that's pretty much what makes it obviously better. The other thing is, because we are putting it on the disconnector on its own plane, it's using its own geometry, it's fitted in a little bit tighter.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at a normal disconnector, okay, this thing wiggles like crazy.
Right.
Ours, there is no movement. It can't move. It's sandwiched in everywhere. It's pinned and staked into place. That makes a big difference. You know, that all that goes into what you feel in your finger. You know, we go a little crazy on the actual surfaces that these hooks are polished up to. The reason is, through first stage, when you pull a lesser quality trigger, you'll feel the two hooks bouncing across each other. As the two hooks separate, they vibrate and they rub. It's very, very, very slight, and some of them are pretty darn good, but they're still not up to what you polish to when you check things out by hand and you assemble by hand.
Right.
So with ours, that first stage, as you're pulling it, it's just as smooth as can be. Okay, you don't have all that rough hook surfaces. When you come up to our wall, you have a very, very definite stop there. Okay, some of them, people, we first started making these, and before we had the distributors that were selling them and things, people would call and ask about our trigger. Well, I'd like to order one. Can I get it in a 1 pound pull? It's like, no, you can't. That's not safe. We don't do things like that. Well, they're used to a little lesser quality, and you have some movement, and you have some of that vibration, and when you have the hammer and the trigger kind of fighting each other here from the spring pressures, it feels even worse. Well, you lighten up all the spring pressures, you lighten everything up, and now, well, it feels a lot better. Well, yeah, that's because it's not safe. You're moving like this with nobody even putting their finger on it. Right. With ours, we put a lot of spring pressure into this disconnector. We can go down into the high 3 pounds if you wish to. Our triggers come with 3 separate disconnector springs. You can change it out to whatever you want. Personally, I always run the heaviest one we have. You can feel it better. If you put a super light spring in something that's this smooth already, you just don't have much feel to it. So that's another thing. You get a very solid wall with ours because we crank a lot of spring pressure into it. We have a small adjusting plug on the bottom here for changing out springs, and you can actually push that, thread in a little bit more, get a couple of more ounces or so pull out of it. So big thing you're going to notice, everything moves smoother. The geometry, so the release is much crisper than you'll find on non-adjustables. It's much faster than a non-adjustable because you're dealing with just 1,000th overlap, and then the spring pressure from the disconnector is holding it. So, that's some of the little things. It just strictly comes down to you make it as exact as you can. You can tune these things and set them right on edge. You've put one in a 308 gun.
I did. Well, let's talk about that. So, when I set it up, I tried one of the trigger mounting blocks just to kind of get a sense of how to install it, see how it worked, and fine tune the adjusting. And I'll say that it's not hard. It's just that you have to be attentive. It's not like your standard drop-in where you just throw your pins in and you're done. A little function check, safety check, okay, we're ready to roll. You have to put your thinking cap on. So, but I didn't think it was hard. But I'll tell you, when I, pulled the trigger for the first time, it hit the wall, and then it broke, and I couldn't even see how the disconnector backed off enough to have it break. I mean, it was just stunning. And I sat there and I tried under any number of circumstances to figure out where was that thing moving, and it was adjusted exactly the way the instructions told me. But I mean, that's phenomenal. And I took it out. I reinstalled it in a 308. I took it out to the range, and I'm telling you, Ron, it was a glorious trigger. I have not fired it like before. No.
Yeah.
And I was amazed.
Yeah.
And everything that you've spoken about in terms of its fit, the way that it comes together, the way that it's assembled and finished, everything you said was spot on with my experience. There was nothing about that, the trigger itself, that deviated in any way. And I sat and I scoured the trigger, looking at the way that disconnector was pinned to that, the trigger, and the whole thing. It was remarkable. I thought it was a very remarkable design. I have several rifles that are kind of the reach out and touch someone kind of rifle, and I was in the Marine Corps. I was an infantryman way back in the Reagan days. So I was a Reagan era Marine, and we were shooting out the 500 meters. So I like that getting out to range for these. But of course, we're in a new age. We have a lot of shooters that really aren't part of that kind of old, concept of what the AR was about. And so in terms of what you think the rifle with that trigger is capable of doing, does it fit into some of these more contemporary uses? Is it a 3-gun trigger? Would you tell a top competitor that they could take this out to a 3-gun match and use it? I mean, obviously, it's still applicable in any of the old CMP match style, cross course. I mean, I would imagine that you're going to have any number of people going back to what was the old unicorn.
Oh yeah. Well, to put it to a more modern way of shooting, the more the tactical shooting, close-up speed shooting, it works pretty good for that. One of the things, the original A1s, okay, the absolute 100% copies of the way Charlie did the triggers, those honestly would be a little slow for a 3-gun match. They'd be a little slow on a tactical course. They have a lot of reset. Okay, so after you fire, you got a lot of reset to it. The only change that we've made to the actual way the trigger functions is we've redesigned one angle on the disconnector and have shortened up. I believe you have an A2 in your, not an A1, but you have an A2 in your rifle.
Yes.
Yeah, that reset is about half the distance that the A1 reset is. So we've shortened up the reset substantially on there. It's much, much faster, way faster. With that, it's pretty, some of these guys, it's hard to say how they shoot them because they're all using, a lot of them are using single stage triggers with like no spring to them at all. Which again, if you're just in a straight up match competition, honestly, I'd probably go with a single stage if I was looking to shoot just blisteringly fast, because that's what you don't have to be that accurate. You're shooting, 25 yards, 20 yards. Well,
right.
You can take the sights off the thing and just, stick a screwdriver in there to make it shoot if you just want it to go fast. So, that it probably would not work well for that. If you're shooting more of a real practical, real life police type, security forces, that sort of thing, the fact that you can put that very heavy wall, second stage springs in there and hold that wall really tight, definitely the way to go. Now you get out on the street or you get an actual moving course where you're going around barricades where you're changing positions, kneeling prone, back up to standing and moving around a barricade. The odds of you accidentally pulling it too soon, I'm not talking about an accidental discharge where you send one off the range, that just makes you look bad no matter what you do, and it can happen to anybody.
Right.
But when you're still, your finger's not in register, you're on the trigger because you're supposed to take one shot from here, drop down and take the second shot, or shoot as you're moving. The odds of you not hitting the target because it went off that split second too soon because you're running such light springs, it's not going to happen with this trigger. It's going to come up against the wall, and you can put it up against that wall and move it around and come off and change position and move on to the next target, and it won't go off because it has. Right. That's where its release point is. So it's good for that. If you're looking for strictly a virtually no spring pressure, as fast as you can pull a trigger, no, it's not the one for you. The nice part is, okay, you're in a match where you're shooting at 200 yards or 100 yards. You were in the Marines. Did you do the M4 course where you had to start off at 50 or 75 and run up to 50, then run up to 25 and all that?
Oh, no.
I'm too old, and I tried that one time and thought, no, this is really dumb. I'm going to go back to enjoying myself shooting. But it will it'll just outperform anything at distance, and it's with the A2 style with the redesigned disconnector. It's going to hold its own close up even. So you kind of got the best of both worlds there. You basically have the national match world class release with a little more speed to it. And our newer models, when the A3s start coming out, that reset's going to be a tiny bit shorter yet. So it'll be even a little bit quicker, but it will not change the release points at all, and it will not change any of the major trigger geometry. So it's still won't be as fast as a super high speed 3-gun trigger. Never will be. It's not made for that. That's just not what it does.
Right.
But for an actual patrol rifle and for a real life tactical course, it's the way to go. We've had one. He gave me permission to put Facebook posts out and put some stuff on our website, but I never did ask him if I could mention his name on a podcast, so I won't use it. But one very, very, very well respected, big time national trainer that's using this now. He liked it. He liked it a whole lot. I was taking a course with him, handgun course, and we're wrapped up, and I said, hey, you got to try this thing. And he tried it and just looked and just immediately, I got to have one of those. I'll mail you one, don't worry. So that's its limitations. It is not going to be this, the straight triggered, super fast, half-pound pull trigger. Not going to happen. But it'll hold it's better than anything at distance, and it'll hold its own close up in a regular tactical competition. So
well, tell me. Go ahead.
You had mentioned you took that out, and the first time you pulled the trigger, you couldn't believe it. I don't know if you look through the little stickers and things that we put in the boxes. There's the one sticker that says the trigger, the trigger, and it has a little silhouette of the trigger on it. So that's actually a copy of the one and only advertisement that Charlie ever did for this thing. And the trigger comes from him and Krieger joking around about the look that people have after they pull it for the first time. And says, yeah, the trigger gives them the look. So that's what you experienced when you pulled that for the first time, and felt just how different it feels to pull something like that.
It's a phenomenal feat of engineering, and to come up with that conceptually, I think it kind of is a testament to what Charlie put into his design.
Yeah, he's a genius. There's no doubt about it. He's very, very good. Yeah, I wish I could take credit for designing it, but I can't. I just could take credit for building it again.
We'll give you all the credit that is available for bringing it back to shooters all across. But let me ask you this, Ron. In terms of the future for the trigger, you've got the A1 and you've got the A2. It sounds like you've got some more in the pipeline. When you talk about refining the trigger and coming up with a next generation, are there things that you're looking to improve, to modernize, to change, to make easier? I mean, what is driving you in terms of the third generation, fourth generation ideas?
Well, quite honestly, there is not really much improvement we could make on the actual design and the release itself, which gives it its character, and what it's known for. And there's no reason to change that. I can't imagine how you could make it feel any better. But little things we can do, like right now, these things they really, really, really like lubrication. We throw a little tube of Slip 2000 in all the boxes, and boy, when you get one out and you get it all set up, you just pour that stuff on there and it'll be happy. So the one little thing that we've changed now, in fact, in 1st of May, just coming up now, next week, we'll be putting out the MK2 A2 bronze. Okay, and what we did was we enlarged the hole for the trunnion where the receiver pin goes through and holds the trigger in the receiver. We've enlarged that. We've pressed in a bronze bearing, bronze bushing made out of bearing material, and machined that and honed it down to the proper size. So what that's going to allow you to do is now, instead of having the steel on steel, you're going to have steel on bronze. Okay, which gives it a little bit different feel. It's smooth. It's really getting smooth. Then, on top of that, the bronze just sucks in lubrication. Mm-hmm. So you won't, if you don't lubricate it as much, it's not going to matter. Now you can go ahead and clean it more. You can, swab it down with some hoppies, spray it out. Get it good and clean. Throw the oil back in there, and the bronze is still going to be sucking that oil right in and holding it. So your pins are going to be running in a bronze bushing and holding in a whole lot more lubrication. The other nice thing is the bronze will machine a little bit easier, and the holes they're very, very true. Okay, it's not easy to make that hole as true as we make it, and they're pretty darn good. Okay.
Yeah.
With the bronze, it will be even straighter. Again, unless you're one of the AMU guys and you're, really you got the most well-educated trigger finger in the world, you probably won't feel a whole lot of it. But over the years and years and years and years, you'll notice it. It's not going to wear. It's going to even, the surfaces are just perfect to run together. So that's one of the improvements coming up. The A2, the first improvements we made was, again, shortening up the reset lengths. The other thing was, I don't know if you look through our older videos on how you fit an A1 where you have to grind the tail down.
Yeah, I saw a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's the tricky part. Okay, when these first came out and when Charlie was making them, you had to grind the tail of that trigger housing to set the amount of over travel you had, and you had to grind it down before you even put it in the gun. So we pre-grind that. Not only has our machining processes gotten better since the last time these were made, the receiver people have gotten much better. So we tried it in absolutely every receiver I could get my hands on, and we came up with a measurement that gives you a good amount of over travel. You're running with a higher, faster reset. We give it a little more over travel, a little more forgiving, so you don't hit that hard stop quite as fast. You get a little forgiveness there. So it's pre-cut. Otherwise, where you drop this thing in and then you started with you're finding your 0 point and setting your disconnector, you would have spent 20 minutes to an hour, grinding that tail down and making it fit before you even got to setting the disconnector.
Geez.
So that was the first big improvement. But we still make the A1s because there's still a lot of target shooters out there that, no, I want 6 thousandths of over travel. I do not want 7 thousandths of over travel. Okay, here you go. Start grinding. You do that one yourself. So that was some of our improvements. The bronze will be out, they say next week. We'll be out with the bronze. The A3s will be out shortly. That'll probably be the end of May. And the A3, the over travel will be completely adjustable. You'll be getting an ambidextrous safety that'll be included in the box. I don't know if I said that the right way to get a free drink or not. But, that will come with
the. It as well as Jake.
Well, it's a little bit different than what you're used to seeing. The safety will actually go in from either side, but have a single paddle on it, a single switch. Our thinking was, I'm right-handed. Why do I need 2 switches on this gun? There's no point to it. Okay, if you're left-handed, why do you need a switch on the other side of the gun? So we made it with just 1 switch. But you can flip it around and put it in either way, and you can put the switch on either way, so it'll work for right or left-handed shooters. That will be adjustable with an Allen screw coming down, an adjusting screw coming down and touching on the floor of the trigger, and allowing you to set the over travel to whatever you want. Within the safety limits, we couldn't just eliminate the over travel completely. Otherwise, you'd throw it in the safe and it wouldn't work at all. It
Right.
just wouldn't be good. So anyhow, that's
hey, Ron,
some of the things.
can you hold on a second?
Sure.
I need to take just a minute.
He's got his cat is sitting on the chair. The dog walked through a little while ago too, so must be a nice house. He's got pets. Yeah. She'd be afraid if she saw a cat on TV. Oh, I'm pretty good.
Ron, you have to forgive me. Usually we have a co-host that covers for me.
You got the cat helping you. You had the dog helping.
Yeah, I tell you what, just a little pet menagerie here.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the advancements. Are there any other advancements that are kind of lined up for the trigger?
There's going to be one more incarnation of this thing coming out probably end of summer, maybe even around Christmas time, end of the year, and that'll have a few more little tricks put on it. Can't really go into that one yet till we get some prototypes done and do some testing.
That's
but it
absolutely
will be,
fair enough.
Yeah, it'll be kind of nice. Again, we aren't going to change any geometry, so you don't have to worry about that. It's going to be the same release that this thing's been known for. Then eventually we would like to start making it fit something else. Use the same concept and start fitting them into AKs and things like that, which I think everybody agree an AK could definitely use a trigger upgrade. So yeah, that's where we like to go with it.
In terms of where you see the trigger, is there a way to step off from this core design, not into other platforms, but into evolved uses? I mean, will you ever get to a point where you're trying to do the hyperspeed trigger, evolving from this into something that accomplishes that goal while still being safe and doing the things that you want to adhere to that original idea of quality? Or do you think that there is fundamentally a limit in what Charlie's design allows you to evolve into?
There is definitely a limit as to what you can do with this. The modifications we've done so far, and the ones that we'll be coming out with shortly and within reasonable amount of time, they are pretty much the limit of what you're going to do and what this type of trigger can accomplish. So yes, it definitely has limitations. The nice part is the more we start playing with this and understanding the relationship, I've talked to Charlie, telling him, well, we want to do this. What do you think would happen? And he'll tell us, you do that, and now you're going to have to move the position of a disconnector pin. You're going to have to move the position of something else. Okay, I don't want to do that because we don't want to change anything. So as we play around with that and we learn more of how the parts interact and how things interact and basically learn how to machine something to the tolerances that we need, we learn more about, okay, well, what if we just totally change something? And okay, you want to make it a very high speed trigger. We've looked at this already into doing things will like right now you have a lot of first stage, okay, which takes away speed. We've looked at ways of changing that. Okay, how can we get less and less first stage out of this thing? It becomes very hard to do and do it safely and not change something drastic. Right. So yeah, eventually we're going to have to, but we'll want to change the basic design. And as we learn more and more about how the things interact and how the machining processes work, if we change the design and we come up with a high speed, an ultra high speed trigger for 3 guns and things like that, if it doesn't feel as good as this feels, if it doesn't feel any better than the competition triggers out there, no point in doing it. We'll only do it if it's going to be better. You don't need to, why build a copy? Okay, well, we decided to change this and now our hooks, are coming, they're on the bottom of the trigger instead of the top for some reason. The hammer's moving backwards. We have 2 springs pushing on it. If it doesn't feel any better, there's no point to it. So as we learn more, yeah, we'll be changing things, and you know, as we learn more, we'll be able to change them for the better. You know, we will not build a new trigger just for the sake of building a new trigger. So
Right.
when you see a 3-gun come out from us, I guarantee you it's because it feels better than the competition's. We'll make sure you get one to try it out right away.
Well, that would be awesome. You know, is there anything that you want to share with our listeners about the trigger? I know we've talked about, you know, where it came from, how you kind of stepped in and really brought it back to life from dormancy, you know, death, whatever it was you want to call that period of absence. But and then just kind of talking about where you are in the future. But you know, it really is such a phenomenal trigger. I don't want to miss anything that you might be able to share with us about what's going on with it.
Well, other than getting the word out there again that it is being made, you know, back in production, there's really not much more that you can say or do do about it. You know, you've said it yourself. It's a phenomenal feel, and about all I could do is tell you that, yeah, we will never skimp on the tolerances that we're holding. We will never just, yeah, good enough. You will never see a good enough coming out of our shop. You know, a couple of little things that we're kind of proud of are we're sponsoring a lot of the junior shooters. You know, we send out a junior shooter certificate to a bunch of the different coaches. Figure, like, in my opinion, you know, the kids can't afford to go out and buy, you know, a $200+ trigger. You know, they've already hit their parents up for enough money to buy a rifle and buy ammunition, and they have to haul them around to the different shoots and park them overnight for a couple of days for Camp Perry and that kind of stuff. So, you know, we figured we'd help out the juniors. The nice part about that for us is we already have one of them down in Texas, a girl down there, a young lady down there that is just annihilating everybody. You know, she's 14 years old, and she's beating everybody in sight, and she's absolutely thrilled using one of our triggers. Well, in a few years, when, you know, she's the one to beat at Camp Perry, everybody's going to walk around and it's like, oh, she's using that trigger. Okay. Yeah, same thing. So we have, you know, young kids up here in Wisconsin that we're sponsoring the junior force team. You know, their eyes are getting better. They're getting stronger and practicing and getting more proficient. And all these other older guys are getting slower. They're shaking more. Their eyes are going away. So, you know, in a few years, yeah, we've been sponsoring the kids, and in a few years, they're going to be the ones to beat, and they're all going to be running our triggers, hopefully. So, a little greedy on our part to make sure that you know, we're the ones to beat in a couple of years. But yeah, that's about it. I'm just proud that the young kids like the trigger. I'm really happy that they're getting a chance to use it. So,
well, Ron, I want you to tell the listeners where they can find your triggers.
If you go on our website, wisconsintrigger.com, you can look up there and you'll see a find a dealer link. Click on that, and they're right at Keystone Accuracy. John Scandell, another big-time target shooter. You could go down, there's Creedmoor Armory, and they're big gun suppliers. Dennis, the owner down there, another. In fact, I believe Dennis holds the world record for an aggregate score with a service rifle using one of our triggers back in the day. I'm pretty sure it was one of our triggers. So you can find them there. You can find them at the Bravo Company, you know, BMC, obviously huge AR supplier, part supplier, very high quality. I know we have Jaws Arms. They're building custom rifles, and he brought some of his rifles out to our shop to show me how they worked, and showed me, he goes, yeah, I'm using this competition other person's trigger, and I tried it. It's pretty much garbage. You know, what do you mean? I said, well, watch. I pulled it back. First off, your first stage, feel how shaky it is. Now, second stage, I gave it a tug. It didn't fire. Why didn't it fire? Well, you got to move it a little bit. I said, I did move it, see? Well, okay. Yeah, okay, I understand. Here, try one of ours. So I handed one of my rifles, and he couldn't believe it. So that was the last time he ever used the competition's trigger. He's using just ours now. So that's Jaws Arms. We have Beyond Ballistics, another target rifle manufacturer, and he's pretty much using all our triggers in his guns now too. So they're getting out there. You just go to the website, wisconsintrigger.com, and click on Find a Dealer, and you'll be able to get one. We have all the installation instructions online. We have videos of the different steps to installing these things. And I think that's pretty much about it that you'll find that you might need to look up on the website. We do have these things come with a full lifetime transferable guarantee. We're even covering the original Milazzo Krieger accuracy built triggers because, quite frankly, they're so good it doesn't cost me a dime to guarantee them because they don't break. So we might as well say, yeah, we'll cover those because I know I'm never going to get any back that they're actually broken.
And I keep wondering, for all those triggers that are out there, are they not coming back? Are they not around because people have squirreled them away like the hoarders would do? Or have they been in the hands of people that cherish them so highly, but by the time they went into a second generation's hands, nobody knew what it was, so they've, I don't know, disappeared into obscurity?
Well, a lot of them, the Army got a big pile of them. The AMU used up a bunch of them that they had, and they threw a lot away. They obviously gave some to the Navy, and apparently they still have quite a few on hand. You wouldn't really give me a whole lot of numbers on that, but they apparently do have some. The other thing is they're still in. You have older guys that are shooting these things. We'll get a phone call every once in a while or get an email saying, "Oh, glad to see it's back. I've been shooting one in competition since 1992. I'd never get rid of that gun. I've replaced my upper 3 or 4 times. I'll never get rid of that thing." So I think a lot of it is they just simply they get put in a gun and they will never leave that gun. Right. And the thing about prying it out of your cold dead hands, a friend of mine came in. He had bought a rifle from an estate, and he was just absolutely thrilled. He came in and goes, "Look at this. It had an original MK2 in it." So, wow. Yeah, that's pretty much the only way you're going to get them. It has to be willed to you if it was one of the older ones, or you just look on the website and call up and order one.
I tell you what, we're really excited to see that you've brought this back. You've taken something that could have gone the way of the dodo and decided that it was important enough to put some time and energy. And I mean, obviously, it's really easy to do that when it's a product you can believe in.
Yeah.
But I tell you that I would definitely put this on the top of my list of triggers to put into a rifle. And I've been an adherent of other trigger manufacturers, but really, up until this point, I didn't think that there was much out there that would really kind of change the shape of what's been done, and this is it. So congratulations to you, Ron.
Well, thank you very much.
Charlie made a hell of a trigger.
Yeah, he definitely did. Great design.
Well, I tell you what, why don't we go ahead and use this as an opportunity to wrap up the show. Once again, wisconsintrigger.com is the place to go to look up where your distributor points are, and to see all of the great instructional videos to get one of these installed. I would definitely suggest that you go out and investigate getting into one of these triggers if, as you have listened to the show, you've discovered that it might fit in with your needs. And even if it doesn't fit in with your needs, I would still suggest giving it a look-see. So with that, we want to remind you to send us any questions or comments to me at ar15.podcast@gmail.com. You can also subscribe and listen to us on iTunes or Stitcher, and we ask that you leave a review so the show can be placed higher in the searches for potential listeners. Also, share your picks with us on Instagram at AR15 Podcast, where you can tag them with the hashtag AR15 Podcast. Also, check us out over on Periscope. Follow us on Google+. Look up our YouTube page. Find us on Facebook. And don't forget that you can check out all of the other great podcasts on the Firearms Radio Network at Firearms Radio Network. Well, actually, I think it's just firearmsradio.tv. Sorry about that. And finally, we would ask that you head on over to Brownells by following our affiliate link at www.ar15podcast.com/parts, where you can find all of your AR-15 needs and support equipment. So anything that you might not be able to find at Brownells, we are certain you can find on Amazon. So you can follow our Amazon affiliate link at the firearmsradio.tv website or ar15podcast.com website. So, guys, thanks once again. Ron, thanks for joining us, and we will see you all next week.
Okay, thanks a lot.
This has been a production of the Firearms Radio Network. You can find more information at firearmsradio.tv.